The dust rose in thin columns behind the wagon as it creaked to a stop outside the weathered ranch house, and Samuel Crawford stood on his porch watching it arrive with the kind of dread that settles into a man's bones when he knows his life is about to change again. 3 months had passed since they buried Mary beneath the cottonwood tree on the hill, and the baby, little Emma, had been crying herself hoarse every night since the fever took her mother. The wet nurses from town had come and gone, each one finding some excuse to leave after a few days. Too remote, they said. Too lonely. Too much like the end of the world. This time, the woman who stepped down from the wagon was different. She moved slowly, deliberately, her considerable frame wrapped in a faded calico dress that had been mended more times than Samuel could count. Her face was round and plain, weathered by sun and hardship, but her eyes held something he recognized, the look of someone who had nowhere else to go. She stood there in the yard, dust settling on her shoes, and waited for him to speak first. The driver had already turned the wagon around, eager to get back to town before dark. Samuel walked down the steps, each board groaning under his boots. He was a tall man, lean from grief and hard work, with hands that had built fences and buried loved ones and held his daughter while she screamed for a mother who would never come back. He stopped a few feet from the woman and removed his hat, because that's what Mary would have wanted him to do. "I'm Samuel Crawford," he said. "You're here about the nursing position." She nodded once, her hands folded in front of her. "Yes, sir. Name's Ruth Hadley. Widow Hadley, they call me in town." She paused, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. "I should tell you straight, I know what the other women said. That I'm not. That men don't—" She lifted her chin slightly, and there was dignity in the gesture that made Samuel's chest tighten. "No one wants a fat girl, sir. But I can nurse the baby. Lost my own son 2 months back, and I still have milk. And I have nowhere else to be." The silence that followed was broken only by the wind moving through the dry grass and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Samuel looked at this woman, this stranger who had just laid bare her heartbreak and humiliation in a single breath, and felt something shift inside him. He thought of Mary, who had never judged anyone, who had welcomed every drifter and downtrodden soul who passed through their land. He thought of Emma, who needed someone to hold her, to feed her, to sing to her in the dark hours before dawn. "Then stay," he said simply. Ruth Hadley's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall, and she nodded again, picking up her small bag from where the driver had dropped it in the dust. Samuel led her inside, where the house still smelled faintly of lavender from Mary's garden and coffee gone cold in the pot. The baby was sleeping fitfully in a cradle near the window, her small fists clenched, her face red from crying. Ruth set down her bag and went to her without a word, lifting Emma with the gentle certainty of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. The baby stirred, whimpered, then latched on to nurse, and the house filled with the sound of contented feeding and Ruth's low humming, a melody Samuel didn't recognize but that seemed to come from somewhere deep and old and true. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both strange and necessary. Ruth moved through the house like she had always been there, cooking meals that Samuel actually ate, mending clothes that had gone too long neglected, keeping Emma clean and fed and calm. She didn't try to fill Mary's space. She carved out her own, quiet and unobtrusive, asking nothing beyond what she needed to care for the baby. She slept in the small room off the kitchen, and Samuel would wake in the night to hear her singing softly to Emma, her voice carrying through the thin walls like a prayer. Samuel found himself watching her sometimes, the way she moved with surprising grace despite her size, the way she smiled at Emma with a tenderness that spoke of her own lost child, the way she sat on the porch in the evenings and looked out at the land, as if she were trying to memorize every detail. He began to understand that Ruth Hadley carried her own grief like stones in her pockets, heavy and constant, but she bore it without complaint. She worked from sunrise to sunset, and when he tried to pay her beyond room and board, she refused. "I'm not here for money," she said. "I'm here because your daughter needs me, because I need her. That's payment enough." One evening, about 6 weeks after Ruth arrived, Samuel came in from mending the fence line to find her crying at the kitchen table. Emma was asleep in her cradle, and Ruth sat there with her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. Samuel froze in the doorway, uncertain. Mary would have known what to do. Mary had always known, but Samuel was just a man who understood cattle and crops and the language of the land, not the complex geography of a woman's sorrow. "Mrs. Hadley," he said quietly. "Ruth, what's wrong?" She looked up at him, her face blotchy and wet, and there was such raw pain in her expression that Samuel felt it like a physical blow. "I was thinking about my boy," she said. "About how he'd be 4 months old now. About how I'll never see him walk or hear him say my name. About how the other women in town whisper that it was my fault, that I was too heavy to carry him properly, that God took him because I'm—" She couldn't finish and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Samuel pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. The lamplight flickered between them, casting shadows on the rough wooden walls. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and rain that might never come. He thought about what to say, how to offer comfort to someone whose pain was as deep as his own. And then he simply told her the truth. "My Mary used to say that grief makes people cruel," he said, "that they need someone to blame because random loss is too frightening to accept. She said people will always find a reason to look down on others. It makes them feel safer. Like tragedy follows rules and they know how to avoid it." He reached across the table and, after a moment's hesitation, placed his hand over Ruth's. "Your son didn't die because of who you are. He died because sometimes babies die and it's not fair and it's not right and there's no one to blame. Just like Mary didn't die because I failed to protect her. She died because fever doesn't care about love or devotion or how much we need someone." Ruth looked down at their joined hands, and Samuel realized it was the first time he had touched another person with tenderness since Mary passed. It felt both like a betrayal and like something necessary, like a man dying of thirst finally allowing himself to drink. "Emma needs you," he said. "But more than that, I think you need Emma. I think we need each other, if I'm being honest. This house was dying before you came. Now it feels like something alive again. What would you have done if you were in his place, turned away someone the world had rejected, or given them a chance to prove that worth isn't measured by appearance but by the size of a person's heart?" The rain finally came that night, drumming on the roof like applause, and Samuel lay in his bed listening to Ruth singing softly to Emma in the next room. The words were indistinct, but the melody was beautiful, full of sorrow and hope braided together in a way that reminded him that grief and joy could exist in the same space, that healing didn't mean forgetting, and that sometimes the people we need most arrive in unexpected forms. The months turned, and Ruth stayed. She became part of the ranch, part of Emma's life, part of the quiet routine that held Samuel together when he felt like falling apart. The townspeople talked, of course, they always did, but Samuel had stopped caring what they thought. He had learned that real strength wasn't found in meeting expectations, but in extending grace to those the world had dismissed. One spring morning, as Ruth sat on the porch with Emma in her arms, both of them bathed in golden sunlight that turned the prairie grass to amber, Samuel realized something profound. Love wasn't always romantic or passionate. Sometimes it was simply the decision to see another person's humanity, to offer shelter when the world offered only storms, to say then stay when everyone else had said go away. Ruth looked up at him and smiled, a real smile, unguarded and genuine, and Emma reached for him with chubby hands, and Samuel understood that they had all saved each other. 3 broken people finding wholeness in the most unexpected way, beneath the vast sky of a land that forgave nothing but offered, occasionally, the grace of second chances. The wind carried the scent of wild roses from Mary's grave on the hill, and Samuel chose to believe it was her way of saying she approved. That sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone new into your life, not to replace what was lost, but to honor it by continuing to live, to care, to open your heart despite the terrible risk of loss. Ruth Hadley had arrived as a woman the world deemed unworthy. She stayed as something far more precious, a reminder that worth is measured in moments of tenderness, in midnight lullabies, in the courage to love again when love has already destroyed you once. And in that small ranch house beneath the endless western sky, 3 damaged souls found what they had all been searching for: a place to belong, a reason to keep going, and the revolutionary understanding that sometimes mercy looks like a simple invitation, then stay offered to someone who had been told, again and again, that they should go.